This is a story from my life, something that really happened. You don't forget the moments that break you, but you definitely never forget the ones that put you back together. The spotlight was blinding, catching the dust motes dancing in the air of the grand ballroom at the Phoenician. Below me, seated at the head table, my Aunt Carol was preening, dabbing a tear from the corner of her eye with a ridiculously overpriced napkin. Next to her, my cousin Jessica offered a polished, media-trained smile to the adoring faces of our extended family, her hand resting on the gleaming crystal award between them. The inscription read, "The Hawthorne Foundation Legacy Award for Integrity and Innovation." They were here to be celebrated for the very thing they had stolen from me, and they had no idea that the anonymous foundation honoring them was mine. They thought this was their victory lap. They were wrong. This was their execution. If you genuinely enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel, tell us where you're from, and what time it is right now. It's always fascinating to know how far our story flows. It all started 5 years earlier, at a Christmas dinner that still feels like a shard of glass in my memory. The setting was my Aunt Carol and Uncle Robert's sprawling Tudor-style house in Paradise Valley, Arizona, a monument to beige conformity and quiet judgment. The air was thick with the scent of pine needles and roasting turkey, a smell I used to love but now associate with the acidic tang of humiliation. I was 24, brimming with the kind of nervous, electric energy you only have when you're about to leap into the abyss of your own ambition. I had just dropped out of my second year at Stanford Law, a decision that had sent shockwaves of horror through the family. To them, a Tier 1 law degree was the holy grail, the ultimate validation. Choosing to abandon that path for a tech startup was like spitting on the family Bible. My father had been a federal judge, my uncle was a senior partner at a major Phoenix law firm, and Jessica, my cousin and Carol's perfect daughter, had just made junior partner at her corporate firm in San Francisco. I was the outlier, the artist, the one who coded instead of litigating, the family failure. That night, I came armed with a pitch deck on my laptop and a rehearsed speech I'd practiced in the car for an hour. I wanted them to understand. I needed them to see that I hadn't thrown my life away. I was building one. After the plates were cleared and the cloying scent of Carol's famous figgy pudding filled the dining room, I cleared my throat. I have something I'd like to share with everyone, I began, my voice shakier than I'd hoped. All eyes turned to me. My mother gave me a small, encouraging nod. My father's expression was carefully neutral, the same mask he wore on the bench. Aunt Carol, however, was already looking at me with a thinly veiled smirk, like a scientist observing a particularly disappointing lab rat. I opened my laptop, the screen casting a pale blue light on the polished mahogany table. I know my decision to leave Stanford was surprising for some of you, I said, trying to meet their gazes. But I left for a reason. I have an idea I believe can change an entire industry. I clicked to the first slide, a clean, elegant logo I had designed myself. ConnectCraft. The problem with the global supply chain, I explained, my passion overriding my nerves, is that it's completely opaque. It squeezes out the small, independent artisans, the weavers in Peru, the ceramicists in Portugal, the woodworkers in Appalachia. Big corporations either rip off their designs or crush them with mass production. Consumers who want to buy ethical, sustainable goods have no way of verifying the source. It's all just marketing. I took a deep breath. ConnectCraft is a platform that solves that. It's a direct bridge between artisan co-ops and small to mid-sized retailers. We'll use a verification system, tell the story behind every product, and provide the logistics to handle international shipping and payments. We empower the creator, and we give the consumer transparency. It's a win-win. I spoke for 10 minutes, my voice growing stronger with every slide, laying out the business model, the market analysis, the 5-year growth projections. I had poured my entire soul into this. This was my law degree, my partnership, my closing argument. When I finished, the room was silent. I looked around, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, hoping for a glimmer of understanding, of pride. My mother was smiling, but it was a watery, hesitant smile. My father was studying his wine glass. Then Aunt Carol let out a short, sharp laugh. It wasn't a kind laugh. It was a sound like a drawer slamming shut. "Oh, Maya, darling," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "That's sweet. All that time at Stanford, and you've come up with an Etsy store for poor people." The words landed like a physical blow. The air rushed out of my lungs. Uncle Robert chuckled dutifully beside her. A few other relatives shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my eyes. "It's not an Etsy store, Aunt Carol," I said, my voice tight. "It's a B2B logistics and verification platform. It's a multi-billion-dollar market." "Is it now?" she cooed, taking a delicate sip of her Chardonnay. "It just sounds like another one of your little art projects. Honestly, what a waste of a perfectly good education. Your father must be so disappointed." I glanced at my dad, whose face was now a stony mask. He wouldn't defend me. He never did, not against his sister. He believed family disputes should be handled with a quiet, dignified retreat, which always translated to letting Carol win. Humiliation burned hot in my cheeks. I felt like a child again, my most precious, drawing being crumpled up and tossed in the trash. But then a voice cut through the tension. "I think it's fascinating, Maya." It was Jessica. She leaned forward, her expression a perfect blend of intellectual curiosity and familial warmth. "Honestly, the legal hurdles alone for that kind of international framework must be immense. How are you planning to handle import-export compliance and artisan contracts?" Hope, foolish and desperate, flickered inside me. Jessica was a lawyer. She was a success. If she understood, maybe the others would. "That's the most complex part," I admitted, turning to her, grateful for a lifeline. "I've been drafting some prototype contracts, trying to create something that's ironclad but still fair to creators who might not have legal resources." "I'd love to see them," Jessica said, her eyes gleaming. "You know, pro bono, just to help out. I could look over your business plan, too. Maybe find some holes you've missed." Her offer felt like a warm blanket on a freezing night. My own cousin, the golden child, was on my side. She believed in me. Over the next hour, while the rest of the family devolved into small talk, Jessica and I were huddled over my laptop at the end of the table. I walked her through everything: the code framework, the financial models, my list of target investors, the proprietary verification process I'd designed. I emailed her the entire pitch deck, my draft contracts, my market research. I gave her everything. I thought I was sharing my dream with the one person who got it. I was actually handing the killer the weapon. The months that followed were a slow, grinding descent into failure. Every door I knocked on slammed in my face. Venture capitalists in Silicon Valley would listen politely, their eyes glazing over, before giving me the same tired lines. "The market's too niche. The logistics are a nightmare. Come back when you have a proof of concept." I was bleeding money, living on ramen and the dregs of my student loans. I tried to follow up with Jessica, but she was always too busy. Her texts became shorter, her replies more sporadic, until they stopped altogether. I assumed she was just swamped with her high-powered job. The thought that she had abandoned me stung, but the idea of something more sinister never once crossed my mind. The discovery came on a Tuesday. It was a miserable, rainy San Francisco afternoon. I was sitting in my cramped apartment in the Mission, the rejection email from what I thought was my last chance investor still burning on my screen. I was scrolling numbly through a tech news site when a headline caught my eye. Artisan Direct secures $20 million in Series A funding, aims to revolutionize ethical sourcing. My breath hitched. The name was different, but the concept. My heart started to hammer against my ribs as I clicked the link. The article was a fawning profile of the company's brilliant founder, a visionary corporate lawyer who had seen a flaw in the global supply chain and had the genius to fix it. I scrolled down to the photo, and there she was, Jessica, smiling that same polished, confident smile from the Christmas dinner table, standing in a sleek, minimalist office overlooking the bay. The world tilted on its axis. I read the article, my blood turning to ice water. It was my company, not a similar idea. It was my idea. The phrasing in the mission statement was lifted directly from my pitch deck. The proprietary verification process they lauded was a carbon copy of the one I had designed. They even used the same target demographics I had identified in my research. She had stolen it all, every last word, every last number. She hadn't just taken my idea, she had taken my soul and put her name on it. I scrambled through my sent emails and found it, the email from the night of that Christmas dinner, with all my files attached, my prototype contracts, my business plan, my life's work, sent by me with a subject line that read, "Thanks so much for your help." I felt a wave of nausea so profound I had to grip the edge of my desk. The kindness, the interest, the offer of help, it had all been a lie, a calculated predatory act of theft disguised as family support. She had gutted me with a smile. And then I understood the silence from the VCs. Jessica hadn't just stolen my idea, she had poisoned the well. With her powerful law firm backing her and a roster of influential connections, she had gotten to the investors first. She had presented my polished, perfected idea as her own, and by the time I showed up, a no-name law school dropout, I looked like a pale imitation. A fraud trying to copy her brilliant concept. She hadn't just closed the door on me, she had locked it and thrown away the key. The humiliation from that Christmas dinner was nothing compared to this. That was a paper cut. This was a disembowelment. And as I sat there in the gloom of my apartment, the sound of the rain drumming against the window like a funeral march, I realized the full, crushing weight of my family's betrayal. They hadn't just called me a failure. They had actively, maliciously, and successfully engineered it. The next 2 years were the dark ages of my life. Artisan Direct exploded. Jessica was everywhere. She was on the cover of Forbes, a keynote speaker at tech conferences, a celebrated female founder in a male-dominated world. Her narrative was perfect. The brilliant lawyer who gave up a lucrative career to pursue a passion for social good. She talked about her epiphany at a family dinner, how she was struck by the desire to help struggling artisans. My epiphany, my desire, my story. Aunt Carol became utterly insufferable. Her Facebook page transformed into a 24/7 shrine to Jessica's success. Every post was a new article, a new award, a new photo of Jessica shaking hands with some tech billionaire, and woven into every caption was a subtle, venomous jab at me. So proud of my Jessica for having the courage and vision to build something real, not just talk about it, she'd write, or, "It just goes to show that a top-tier education and a strong work ethic are what truly matter." Each post was a fresh twist of the knife. The family, as always, fell in line. My cousins and uncles would share the posts with fawning comments. "Incredible! She's an inspiration!" No one questioned it. No one reached out to me. In their eyes, the narrative was simple and clean. Jessica was a genius, and I was the jealous, bitter failure who couldn't handle her cousin's success. My own parents tried to be supportive, but they were trapped. They urged me to move on, to find my own path. When I tried to tell them, really tell them, that Jessica had stolen my work, they couldn't accept it. "Maya, honey, ideas are a dime a dozen," my father said, his voice laced with a weary paternalism. "It's the execution that matters. She just executed it better." They saw a family squabble, not a grand larceny. They wanted peace, and the price of peace was my silence, my truth. I was completely, utterly alone. My own startup, A desperate, half-hearted pivot into a different niche fizzled out and died, leaving me with a mountain of debt. I had to give up my apartment in the Mission and move into a tiny, run-down studio in the outer Richmond, a neighborhood that felt like a permanent gray fog, both literally and metaphorically. I took a soul-crushing job as an administrative assistant at a dental supply company, a universe away from the world of tech and innovation I had once dreamed of inhabiting. My days were a monotonous cycle of data entry, scheduling appointments for people I'd never meet, and unjamming the copy machine. My nights were spent staring at the ceiling, the injustice of it all a hot, churning poison in my gut. I saw a therapist who told me to practice radical acceptance. I tried yoga. I tried journaling, but you can't meditate away a grand theft. You can't breathe through a betrayal that dismantled your entire sense of self. The villain seemed invincible. Jessica's company was a fortress, protected by the best lawyers in San Francisco and a PR team that could spin arsenic into gold. She was the darling of the media, a symbol of ethical capitalism. And I was a nobody, an anonymous face in a cubicle farm, addressing envelopes and ordering staples. The power imbalance was a chasm. She had all the money, all the connections, all the credibility. I had nothing but a story no one believed. Every time I saw her face on a magazine or heard her name on a podcast, it was a reminder of my own powerlessness. I felt like a ghost, haunting the edges of a life that should have been mine. The world celebrated her for my work, while I was invisible. The turning point didn't come with a flash of lightning or a dramatic confrontation. It arrived quietly on a Wednesday afternoon, under the flickering fluorescent lights of the dental supply office. I was collating spreadsheets for a quarterly report, my mind numb with boredom, when I overheard my boss talking to someone from marketing. He was talking about corporate philanthropy, specifically about how sponsoring a local charity gala had generated more positive press for their company than $1 million in advertising. "It's all about the optics," he said with a cynical laugh. "You slap your name on something good, and everyone thinks you're a saint." And that's when the first spark ignited in the cold, dead darkness of my mind. Optics. Slap your name on something good. Jessica and my aunt were obsessed with optics, with the appearance of success and virtue. Their entire identity was built on a curated public image. What if, instead of trying to attack the fortress head-on, I just changed the name on the front gate? The idea was vague at first, a wisp of smoke, but it refused to be extinguished. It wasn't about getting my old idea back anymore. That ship had sailed. It was about building a better one, a smarter one. It was about understanding the rules of the game they had played so masterfully, and then using those rules against them. That night, I didn't go home and stare at the ceiling. I went to the 24-hour Kinko's on Van Ness Avenue. I bought 3 books, one on corporate law, one on blockchain technology, and one on covert marketing. I went back to my sad little apartment and started to read. For the first time in 2 years, the churning poison in my gut wasn't just anger, it was fuel. I wasn't going to accept what happened. I wasn't going to move on. I was going to burn their whole world to the ground, and I was going to use their own vanity as the kindling. The family failure was done crying. She was ready to go to war. The next 3 years were a study in monastic discipline and calculated invisibility. I lived like a ghost. I kept my head down at the dental supply company, becoming the most reliable, unremarkable employee they had. I saved every penny, paid off my debts, and lived on a shoestring budget. But my real life began after 5 p.m. I enrolled in night classes at UC Berkeley's Haas School of Business, focusing on supply chain management and international finance. I spent my weekends in coding boot camps, not learning the basics, but mastering the advanced, cutting-edge stuff, specifically blockchain and data encryption. I was forging myself into a weapon, piece by piece, in the shadows. My new idea was an evolution of the old one, smarter and more ruthless. Jessica's Artisan Direct was built on a promise of ethical sourcing, but it was just a promise, a marketing slogan. There was no real proof. I discovered their weakness. Their verification system was a sham. It was a glorified checklist that could easily be faked by suppliers. That was the crack in their fortress. My new platform, which I codenamed Argent, would be built on unshakable proof. I designed a system that used blockchain to create an immutable, transparent ledger for every single item in a supply chain. From the moment a raw material was harvested to the moment the final product was shipped, every step would be recorded, time-stamped, and verified on a decentralized network. You couldn't fake it. You couldn't tamper with it. It replaced a marketing promise with a mathematical certainty. It made artisan direct obsolete. I built the entire thing myself, working from my cramped apartment, the glow of my monitor, the only light in my life. To the outside world, I ceased to exist. I didn't date. I didn't see friends. I declined every family invitation, feigning illness or work commitments. My parents worried, but I was vague, telling them I was working on a project. They assumed it was another one of my hobbies. No one suspected a thing. When the platform was ready, I knew I couldn't be the face of it. Maya Evans was a known failure, so I created a new identity. I legally formed a shell corporation in Delaware, a sterile, anonymous entity called Viridian Chain Solutions. I hired a registered agent to be the public face. For the company name itself, the one the public would see, I chose something simple and powerful: Source Right. The launch was silent. No press releases, no fancy parties. I targeted a handful of small, influential European retailers who were obsessive about sustainability. I offered them the service for free for 6 months. All I asked was that they test it, verify its integrity, and, if they were satisfied, provide a testimonial. The first one signed on a week later. A month later, I had 10. The testimonials were glowing. A game changer for transparency. The holy grail of ethical sourcing. The technology spoke for itself. It was simply better, more secure, and more honest than what Artisan Direct offered. I started charging for the service, and the revenue started to trickle in. Then it became a stream, then a river. All the while, I watched Jessica and Aunt Carol from a distance, a digital ghost tracking their every move. Jessica's star was beginning to tarnish. Rumors were starting to bubble up in the tech world about Artisan Direct's flimsy verification process. A few investigative journalists were sniffing around, questioning whether their feel-good story was too good to be true. I may have helped those rumors along. Using an anonymous, encrypted email address, I sent a few documents, shipping manifests from questionable suppliers that I'd obtained through a private investigator I'd hired with my first real profits, to a particularly tenacious reporter at TechCrunch. I didn't add any commentary. I just sent the proof and let them draw their own conclusions. The article that came out a month later was devastating. It didn't mention me, but it eviscerated Artisan Direct, exposing their ethical partners as sweatshops and their verification as a joke. Their stock price tumbled. Their clients started to get nervous. And that's when Source Right, my silent, creeping predator, began to pick them off one by one. I offered their disgruntled clients a superior service for a lower price, and they jumped ship in droves. Within 18 months, my ghost company, run by a supposed team of anonymous developers, was dominating the market. Jessica's fortress was beginning to crumble, and then, like a gift from the gods of vengeance, I got the email. It was a mass email from Aunt Carol to the entire extended family. The subject line read, "Save the date, a Hawthorne family reunion to remember." My eyes scanned the text. It was going to be a massive, ostentatious affair. A 3-day weekend at the Phoenician, the most luxurious resort in Scottsdale. A celebration of family, legacy, and all of our incredible achievements. I knew what that meant. It was the Jessica and Carol Victory Tour. A chance for them to gloat, to flaunt their success in front of everyone, to cement their places at the top of the family hierarchy. Reading the email, with its flowery language about togetherness and pride, I felt a cold, crystalline certainty settle over me. This was it. This was the stage. They were building the theater for their own public execution, and they didn't even know it. I opened a new browser tab and began to type. It was time to create the second phase of my plan. It was time to build a foundation. I called it the Hawthorne Foundation. Hawthorne was my mother's maiden name. It felt fitting. A little piece of the family they had tried to cast me out of, repurposed as a weapon. I funneled a significant chunk of source rights profits into it, endowing it with an impressive, entirely legitimate financial portfolio. Its mission statement was simple and beautiful: to provide grants and awards to entrepreneurs who demonstrate exceptional integrity and innovation in their fields. Through my lawyers, the Hawthorne Foundation made a proposal to my Aunt Carol. An anonymous benefactor, a new foundation dedicated to celebrating family legacies, had heard about their reunion and wanted to sponsor the entire event. Every room, every meal, every cocktail, all expenses paid. There was only one condition. The foundation wished to present its inaugural Legacy Award during the main dinner on Saturday night to honor the family members who most embodied their principles. Aunt Carol, blinded by ego and the prospect of a free, top-of-the-line party, took the bait so fast it was almost comical. She replied within the hour, gushing with gratitude and accepting the terms without a single question. She was so sure the award was meant for her and her perfect daughter. She had no idea she was signing her own death warrant. The trap was set. The invitations went out, and for the first time in 3 years, I RSVP'd yes. I was coming home, but the girl they remembered, the weeping failure from that Christmas dinner, was long gone. The person who was coming to the reunion was the founder and CEO of Viridian Chain Solutions. She was the architect of their downfall, and she was coming to collect. The reunion weekend was a masterclass in surrealism. I flew into Phoenix Sky Harbor, rented a nondescript sedan, and checked into the Phoenician under my own name. The moment I walked into the lobby, I was swept into a vortex of forced smiles and awkward hugs. "Maya, you look, well," relatives would say, their eyes flickering with a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. They treated me like a strange cousin who'd just been released from a long, unexplained stay at a sanatorium. I was the ghost at the feast, a walking reminder of failure in their gleaming temple of success. I played the part. I was quiet, demure, and observant. I let them think I was intimidated by the opulence, by their casual displays of wealth. I watched as Aunt Carol held court by the pool, her voice a booming megaphone of self-congratulation. I watched Jessica, surrounded by a fawning circle of cousins, recounting a sanitized, heroic version of her company's origin story. She never mentioned me once. It was as if I had been erased from the family history. My private investigator, a discreet and ruthlessly effective man named Mr. Chen, had delivered the final piece of the puzzle 2 days earlier. He had managed to get a sworn affidavit from a disgruntled former executive at Artisan Direct, a man Jessica had fired to take the fall for the sweatshop scandal. The affidavit detailed everything: how Jessica knew their suppliers were fraudulent, how she had ordered the cover-up, and, most beautifully, how she had openly bragged in a board meeting about stealing the entire concept from her clueless cousin. Chen had also gotten his hands on the audio recording of that meeting. It was my smoking gun, a nuke. The night before the big dinner, I sat in my quiet hotel room, the lights of Scottsdale twinkling below, and listened to the recording. I heard my cousin's voice, so clear and confident, laughing as she described my passionate pitch at the Christmas dinner. She literally handed me the keys to the kingdom, she boasted to the laughter of her board members. And the best part is, the whole family thinks she's just a bitter, lazy washout. They'll never believe her. A cold fury, clean and pure, settled into my bones. She was right. They wouldn't have believed me. so I had to make them see. The grand ballroom was suffocatingly opulent. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling, casting a warm glow on the sea of tables draped in white linen. The family was dressed to the nines, the men in dark suits, the women in glittering gowns. At the head table, Carol and Jessica were glowing, soaking in the adoration. They looked untouchable. The evening crawled by with agonizing slowness. There were endless toasts, a slideshow of old, family photos, and a truly terrible speech from my Uncle Robert. I picked at my seared scallops, my heart a steady, rhythmic drum against my ribs. I felt strangely calm. I was a surgeon about to make the first incision. Finally, the moment arrived. The event MC, a hired professional with a plastic smile, stepped up to the podium. "And now," he announced, his voice echoing through the ballroom, "we have a very special presentation from our generous sponsors, the Hawthorne Foundation. To present the Foundation's inaugural Legacy Award, please welcome the head of the Foundation." A polite ripple of applause went through the room. Aunt Carol and Jessica exchanged a smug, knowing glance. They straightened their shoulders, ready for their moment. The MC looked at his notes, a flicker of confusion on his face. "Please welcome Miss Maya Evans." The name dropped into the room like a stone in a silent pond. The applause faltered, sputtering into a confused silence. Every head turned towards me. I saw my mother's hand fly to her mouth. My father's face went pale. At the head table, Aunt Carol's smile froze and then curdled. Jessica's face was a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. I pushed back my chair and walked towards the stage, the sound of my heels clicking on the marble floor, the only noise in the cavernous room. I felt 100 pairs of eyes on me, burning with questions and disbelief. I reached the podium, adjusted the microphone, and looked out at the sea of stunned faces. I met Jessica's gaze. Her eyes were wide with a dawning, horrified comprehension. I gave her a small, cold smile. "Good evening, everyone," I said, my voice clear and steady, amplified by the speakers. "It's so good to see you all. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Maya Evans, and I am the Hawthorne Foundation." A collective gasp went through the room. I let the statement hang in the air for a moment before continuing. "We created this foundation to celebrate integrity, to honor those who build their success on a foundation of truth. And tonight, we are here to honor two members of our family who have taught me more about the true meaning of legacy than anyone else, my Aunt Carol and my cousin Jessica." I turned to them, my smile widening. "Please, come on up." They moved like automatons, their faces ashen. They ascended the stairs and stood beside me, trapped in the glare of the spotlight. The crystal award sat on a small table, mocking them. I picked it up. It was heavy. "This award," I said, my voice dropping to a more intimate, conversational tone, "is for innovation. And I've learned that innovation can take many forms. Sometimes it's about creating something new. And sometimes," I paused, looking directly at Jessica, "it's about recognizing a brilliant idea when you see one and having the courage to claim it as your own." Jessica flinched as if I'd slapped her. A nervous murmur rippled through the audience. I knew I had them. I had to land the final blow. Some of you may remember a Christmas dinner 5 years ago where I presented an idea for a company that would connect artisans with retailers, built on a platform of transparency. I was discouraged. I was told my idea was foolish, that I was a failure for even dreaming it. I gestured to the large screens on either side of the stage. "Roll the audio, please." A click, a hiss of static, and then Jessica's voice filled the ballroom, crisp and clear. "She literally handed me the keys to the kingdom," her recorded voice laughed. The sound of male laughter from her board members followed, and the best part is, the whole family thinks she's just a bitter, lazy washout. They'll never believe her. A tidal wave of shock rolled through the room. People were turning to stare at Carol and Jessica, their expressions of adoration now morphed into masks of disgust and disbelief. Aunt Carol looked like she was going to faint. Jessica's face had crumpled, her mask of composure shattered into a million pieces. "She was right about one thing," I said calmly into the microphone, my voice cutting through the stunned silence. "You wouldn't have believed me, so I had to build something else, something better." The logo for Source Right flashed onto the screens, bold and undeniable. "My company, Source Right, is built not on a promise of integrity, but on mathematical proof. We've spent the last 18 months acquiring the majority of Artisan Direct's former clients, who were tired of paying for a lie." I let that sink in. And as for Artisan Direct itself, well, after the scandals, the stock collapse, and the mass client exodus, the company was on the verge of bankruptcy. So this morning, my other company, Viridian Chain Solutions, acquired all of Artisan Direct's remaining assets for a fraction of their original worth. I looked at Jessica, whose eyes were now filled with tears of pure, unadulterated hatred. "I got my company back, Jessica." I placed the heavy crystal award in her trembling hands. "Congratulations on your legacy?" Then I turned, walked off the stage, and didn't look back. I didn't need to see the fallout. I could feel the waves of shock and condemnation radiating behind me. I walked past my parents, who were staring at me as if they'd never seen me before, and straight out of the ballroom doors into the cool Arizona night. The aftermath was a symphony of destruction. Aunt Carol and Uncle Robert were social pariahs. The family they had ruled through judgment and condescension turned on them with a vengeance. Jessica was finished. The recording of her confession went viral in the tech community. She was fired from what was left of her own company, her reputation so toxic that she would never work in that town or any town again. They sold their massive house in Paradise Valley and moved somewhere small and insignificant. They were erased. I never spoke to them again. I didn't need to. The silence was my victory. My parents called, of course. They were full of apologies, of explanations, of regret. I listened, and I told them I understood, and in some way I did. But something between us had been fundamentally broken and could never be perfectly reset. The bond of unconditional trust was gone, replaced by the memory of their doubt. My life, however, flourished. SourceRight became the industry standard. I was no longer an anonymous ghost. I stepped into the light as the company's CEO. I did my own magazine covers, my own keynote speeches. I told my own story, the real one, and it resonated with people far more than Jessica's fabricated fairy tale ever had. I built the life I had dreamed of on my own terms, from the ashes of the one they had tried to burn down. It was a life built not just on success, but on truth. The ultimate revenge wasn't just in their downfall, but in my rise. It was in proving that the family failure was, in fact, the only one who had truly understood the meaning of legacy all along. Tonight I'm sitting in my corner office in San Francisco, looking out at the city lights glittering across the bay. My phone buzzes on the desk, a notification for a new voicemail. The number is blocked, but I know who it's from. I can feel the desperate, toxic energy radiating through the device. I stare at it for a long moment, thinking of all the rage, the tears, the years of pain encapsulated in that tiny icon. I think of Christmas dinners and crystal awards and the satisfying, beautiful silence of justice. Then I press and hold the notification. A small menu appears. I tap the little trash can icon. I deleted the voicemail because some legacies are meant to be erased. Thanks. The end.